Um,
Okay, everybody. Hi, and welcome to the Relevar Home Care and Alivity Care Advocates. This is our community education series today. It's Friday. We're really happy. And I have with me here today, this is Misty Delgado. I'm the owner of Relevar Home Care and Alivity Care Advocates. And I've got Krista Rolando, our administrator. Hi, Krista.
Hi, everyone.
And we've got Dawn Folk, and she's from Clinton Creek Assisted Living and Memory Care. Hey, Dawn.
Hi, everybody.
And so just so that you know, we feel being in the industry for so long that we know a lot of really knowledgeable people like Dawn, who owns and runs her own assisted living and a memory care community. And we feel by having these sessions, we can help educate some of the folks on our Facebook friends on learning what to do, how to do, even being able to forward these on to your friends if they're running into some challenges on what to do. So, and I have to say, and I think both of you guys will agree, I mean, choosing what type of assisted living, if you need assisted living, if you need independent living, is very confusing, right? So,
Yes.
I mean,
There's a lot more options.
yeah.
Wow.
And a ton more communities out there, right?
Yeah, blurry lines between us independent, assisted, memory, group homes, a lot of blurry lines.
Yeah, right. So, but before we get too far into that, Krista, do you want to tell our friends just a little bit about the company and what we do?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, everyone. Welcome to our community education series. At Relevar Home Care, we provide care to people who can no longer do some things for themselves in home, or maybe they're struggling with their independence and they may be unsure what the future holds for themselves or their loved one that they're trying to provide care for. And, you know, we can come in, we have nursing and we have phenomenal caregivers that can come in and help with that care so that you or your loved one can stay in your home for as long as possible. And, you know, we can keep you safe. And at Alivity Care Advocates, we have care managers, care advocates that do just that. They can go with your family member or you to the hospital and be that voice that we all need if we have to go into the hospital. You know, things are occurring that we can't keep track of when we're sick. And then also our care managers can help move you into a facility, move your loved one into a facility that is appropriate for what your level of care entails. And that's part of the reason we have Dawn with us today.
Right. So thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, so Dawn, thanks for joining us. We're so excited to talk to you about this because I was just thinking about, we've known each other for so long, you know, you've been in the industry a long time.
Hey, no.
Time. And, you know, we really just kind of connected after you started this community, which is an amazing community. I'm so excited to, you know, talk to people about it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got where you're at right now?
Yeah, thanks, Misty. I started off in independent living with the Pine Ridge Retirement Communities, and that's how I learned about senior housing. It was great. Individuals back then were really independent. They could make up their own decisions. They could do their own thing. And the world was smaller in the elder care arena. It wasn't as large with as many options and many choices as they have now. So it was a little bit different. It was nice to be able to start that way and try to get to know the industry, but it's really grown by leaps and bounds. So even me being in this industry, as I'm sure you can attest to, it's hard to stay on top of what's going on and which community is popping up on which corner and what the best choices are. And it's a little bit harder to navigate than it used to be now that I went from independent to assisted, now into the assisted and memory care arena. So trying to find that best place it's a little bit more difficult. It's more challenging. Price point comes into play, services come into play, licensing comes into play. So there's a lot more to it nowadays. And so I'm in the assisted living and memory care just because I feel like that's where I needed to be as far as making sure individuals get more personalized care versus being in one of the big 120 unit communities where there might be only one activity director for all of them. And that means only a handful of them kind of come out, where here we can pretty much have our eyes on all of our residents and just kind of grab them for all the activities to get them involved as much as possible. So I just like the smaller setting myself, but other people like the larger.
Yeah, I do have to say, I really like the size of your community and knowing that you have, and we can get a little bit further into the activities and what your community does in comparison to some of the other ones, because I do tour a reasonable amount of communities for family members. But before we get too far, can you help us understand, because, you know, like you said earlier, what's a group home? What's a independent assisted memory care? And then how do I know which one I should even be looking at as a family member?
That's the hard part. Even in today's information age, you would think it'd be a lot easier than it is. There's companies like A Place for Mom that say they can handle it all, or different other services. Just a little bit of background about those. They only will tell you about the companies that can afford to pay for them. And then paying a 1 month fee up front to have someone move in, and they may only be with you 2-3 months, is very costly. So a lot of us can't afford a service like A Place for Mom. So unfortunately, you miss out on those little local gems that are in your community. So first of all, the doctors unfortunately are not as knowledgeable as they need to be. And a lot of people want to rely on their doctors. And I understand that. So doctor, tell me, where does mom need to be? They want someone to say, where does mom need to be? Where does dad need to be, brother, sister? There's no one that's really there to say that, except Misty, you have that service, which is great. They try to get a geriatrologist to tell them no one will really tell you. And then you get online and you Google it and you see 20 different communities instead of just the 3 or 4 there used to be. And then to go within a 20-minute radius, you can even get larger communities. It really has to be your preference, and the touring can be overwhelming. Getting out a place for mom, all of a sudden you got 50 people calling you and you're trying to figure out who called me last, what, when, and why. Then you put the financial on top of that, and that's a whole nother challenge. Like in my case, I'm not the cheapest, I'm not the most expensive. But the reality is I'll direct you if I'm not the right place. And I'm not always perfect either, and I don't always work out for people. But there are places like a group home, maybe where I have friends and family whose loved ones in a group home. There's 4 or 5 people in this group home, maybe 6. And they get one person that cooks and cleans and does the housekeeping, and they're perfectly content. They don't like to be around a lot of people. They don't like big places. They might be more towards end of life where they really don't care about all the different activities. And that's just where they are in their life. A group home's great for that. They have their purpose. And these smaller communities are all over the place. You really want to make sure they're licensed, though. Misty and I have talked about this before. Licensing really keeps everybody in check. Not that Adult Protective Services isn't out there and some other means that you can contact if you have issues. But for the most part, licensing makes sure I have certain care ratios, service plans in place, generators, fire safety, and everything else. But one of the other key factors is you can be unlicensed, but with licensing, all the staff in my community is my staff. Yes, on occasion, because of the situation with COVID, I have placement agencies in here, but I have control over who my employees are, if I need to get rid of them, what my ratios are, how many people are in my building, taking care of those. Going to the next step outside of a group home is independent living. And I was involved with that arena. You have 120 people, say, in a community, you have one activity director. Typically the top 20-30% are involved at that point, because there's no way you have enough time in the day to say, Tom, do you want to come down? Sue, do you want to come down? You just can't do that. You don't have the time. But if they're not those that like to participate, and you really just want to know that someone's there 24/7 and they have an apartment and they're independent, great. But independent is now become assisted living, and it has been for a while now. I just feel it's an injustice for the simple fact that there's no caregivers, there's no ratios, there's no staff guidance, there's fire safety is another key factor that those individuals in case of fire need to get out of those communities. And are they safer in their own than they would be in their own home with fire suppression systems? Yes, by all means. So all of those are things you have to factor in when you're looking for a different place. Then you have assisted living, and assisted living basically.
Dawn, on that independent living, just from my
Yep.
experience, you're right. They do have services. So, but they're also typically contracted services.
Correct.
So they're very fractured in the kind of care that's being provided. And I can tell you that from my experience, it's usually the family's biggest frustration. So the reason why I like to go with communities like yours is because, like you said, they're your employees. You guys direct them. And when I've had other communities with independent living and outside agencies providing the care, I've actually had the directors say they don't report to me. You'll have to go to the home care agency, and the home care agency isn't responsive,
Frustrating.
Very frustrating. I mean, we had one particular instance where we couldn't even get the caregivers to hand a bottle of water to the client. And to get that something simple like that done was very hard. So I'm not a big fan of independent living, by the way, but yeah, it works for some because it's a little more inexpensive, but not for very many.
Right.
I think a lot of people end up there.
Yeah, they do. Independent living's not really doing it justice by becoming assisted living. People that are in hospice, people that cannot be mobile and get out of the community in case of an emergency, people that when you have one activity director and you take into consideration 120 residents, for them to even spend a minute, that'd be 2 hours of their day just to try to say, hey, do you want to come to an activity? The whole point of them being there is the socialization. And then the other part is the care. If they're really in the community that's independent, the care should be there. And these outside services are, you have someone on the second or third floor, back in the far corner, and then you have someone in the middle, then you have someone downstairs or who knows where. And the pendants are going off and the staff's like, who's on first, what's on second? I have no idea who's on third. If your loved one can handle that, then independent living's for them. If you don't care what happens. Now, assisted living right now in memory care with COVID and everything that's going on, we always have issues and concerns, but you want to be able to get to them as soon as possible. You want to make sure there's a pendant system in place that escalates. If one doesn't get to them, then the next one, then the next one. And if it gets to the nurse, get on the floor, get going on and see and run those reports to see what your ratios are. We're continually working on that ourselves, but we know that we have certain guidelines and expectations in place when families move in that we need to try to maintain. And sometimes if they need more of the one-on-one care, they really should be, if they can afford it, having one-on-one care. That's just someone sitting there with them and doing whatever they want. Now, sometimes that can be boring for people too. So if they're active and they want to have activities, they want to have parties, they want to have socializations, check out my Clinton Creek Facebook page, you'll see it. I often sometimes hear, once in a while, oh, you're just doing that for the marketing. Like I was telling Misty, no, I do that to show people that we should be living and they should be living. And when I first got into this assisted living, I'm like, I'm not just warehousing individuals. They need to have parties. They need to have activities. I have one of the largest activity budgets around for that reason. I have 2 caregivers for that reason. Not caregivers, life enrichment individuals, because 1 to 31, they could get them more involved. They come in depressed, they come in bored, and oh no, they won't do that. Time and time again, I hear they won't participate in that. They won't paint, they won't do that. I have a friend of the family here. Oh, they won't do that. He won't do that. He doesn't remember how to do that.
Right.
They're doing it. And it's great to see what little bit of life they have left. They're doing
I always
it.
like
For
the one
instance,
with bingo.
Misty has someone.
My mom hates bingo.
Yes. Bingo. Bingo. Exactly. My mom won't paint, or my dad's not going to color. Well, our coloring's not childish coloring. If we say, hey, you're going to make this for your wife or your daughter, it gives them a little bit more incentive on how you talk to them. And the parties. You got to have parties. I don't care what day of the week it is. If it's boring outside and we haven't had fun things to do, or we've had the sniffles for the week, let's have a party. And the activities, I'm so blessed. My social directors and life enrichment directors go above and beyond. I've given them the budget. I've given them the means. And from our friends who have carriage rides, and yes, we pay for all this, to you open our activity drawers and they're bursting with things. And that's really what it should be about. It doesn't take that much time, extra time. It takes more money, yes. But it really should be focused on what makes them happy for the day. And you'll see the number of individuals that actually participate in the various things we do. It's not your typical 30%, 20%. My goal is always 60, 70%. You're going to have those guys that say, no, I'm good with my Westerns. Give me my John Wayne, leave me alone. If it's food, we're coming. If it's bands, we're coming. So they do come for those, and we do have bands, and we do have different things for them as well. But we have woodworking and metal, not metalworking anymore, but we do have the woodworking, leather, bowling, you name it. We think
That's
outside
really
of the
unique.
box.
Yeah, and it does stick out in my mind, because I probably have done maybe 10 tours in the last 2 months. And at your community, it does stand out that your activities were mature. They were things that folks would come in and enjoy doing and not feel like they're childish, if that makes sense.
And that's what we want, even on memory care. You'll see some blocks and things like they used to Lincoln Logs. Maybe they used to do that when they were kids. I don't necessarily think that's childish, but I do want, as much as possible, if we're doing an activity on assisted living, if we can gear it and just change it up a little for memory care, we do that.
Right.
And they love it. You get a car. They used to do box, derby cars, whatever they used to be in Cub Scouts or Awanex clubs or whatever they were. They understand those. And if we use a purpose behind that to give them to Toys for Tots or give them to the local kids, that's great. Let's give them a purpose behind what they're doing. So it's meaningful and they still feel like they're part of the community.
Right.
It's about quality of life.
Right.
It is.
So when you look
And
at
care's big.
When you look at the different types of communities, group homes, they're licensed. When you look at independent living is not.
They can or
licensed.
cannot be, depends.
And then
Correct.
assisted living.
Independent. Be careful. The world's changed. You need to make sure that license is posted at that door because there's some saying they're assisted living out there and they are not licensed. And then I find out, I said, no, they're not licensed. If you're looking for memory care, you really, really, really should be licensed. If you're looking for that place for your loved one, and if you're really caring about them, because our windows can only go up a certain amount, our doors have to be a certain way, our alarm systems have to be a certain way, our programs have to be a certain way. There are out there that are not licensed, and there's different waivers and different ways that they can get around that. So you really have to be more careful nowadays with the licensing. Make sure it's at that front door.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I was researching a group home recently, and when I asked the owner if she was licensed, she paused and then said her license had expired and she didn't need to get one because she didn't have enough residents in there. So there is a threshold of, from a group home standpoint, that you have to have so many residents to be required to have that licensing. But, where exactly do they go to see if the place is licensed?
That's a good question. It's called Lara, Lara, and you can go on that website. You can also look up to see if they've had any surveys or infractions or issues brought against them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have too, but you'll see how we resolve them, or there was no issue found. So hopefully there's typically no issue found, or it was something minor that, hey, okay, we forgot to cross our T here. But you really want to read through there. If, some places can have 15, 20 pages of these different things going on, and you're like, oh no, what happened? And Lara is a great place to research that. First, to see if they're licensed. Second, to see if they kept their license or what's going on with their license. And then also to see if there's been any issues or concerns. Now, that won't necessarily bring up issues or concerns from Adult Protective Services, but typically if you're licensed, those will be a hand in hand that you'll see that was documented. And you want to read through those and see how they resolved and if they were closed out, because some of them can be minor, but some can be pretty important, and you really want to check those out. Then sometimes you'll find out that they, hey, it's not working out for us managing ourselves, or this management company we've hired a new management company, the executive director, and now we've got, a year later, we have our act together. So you've got to research it a little bit more than you used to, but definitely make sure that you look up Lara to make sure that they really still do have their license. It wasn't revoked, and State's usually pretty much on top of that.
Yeah. So I know recently, looking at Lara, by the way, and I think you're right, based on what I've done, is most companies have some action on their license. There's a severity of, what occurred, something very minor, like you said, a care plan wasn't signed or updated, to, giving the person wrong medication. But I can tell you probably a lot more has not been, in general reported, but I like to look at those at least as a general flag and talk to talk to the community about it. And I like how you said, your community is really you would look at that and figure out how you need to do better. And I can tell you from a recent community that I talked to, the nurse basically said to me, I can't talk to you about that. I'm not willing to talk to you about that. And, I'm a huge fan of, hey, we all make mistakes, but let's be transparent with what happened and how we went about fixing it, and not talk about it, because then sometimes we don't ever come to a resolution to fix the problem.
Correct. And that's another thing, Misty, you and I have talked about, being an owner. I'm not always here. I have staff that I've hired, hopefully that's very qualified and very knowledgeable. But you often hear that my mom or dad won't say anything to you because they're afraid of repercussions. Somehow that came back from who knows the years ago or what, but in my situation, that should never be the case. We actually want you to communicate with us more than less, because I can't fix it. We might have housekeepers out with COVID for a couple of days, unfortunately, today's day and age, and we're going to have to get caught up on our housekeeping. Our midnights might have to kick in or something. But if we don't know about it, we really can't get to it. Or, mom said this or dad said this about a caregiver. I need to know so I can get rid of them right away. I mean, I research it, I look into it, and I do the facts first, because it's also not fair to that caregiver in that situation. But those situations we take very seriously, and we do need to resolve them. Unless I hear from you and hear from the family members, I really can't. I can't fix it. And then there's those times where the food's been spot on every single day of the week, and then something happened, and that happens. I mean, that's normal in these industries. But when it comes to care and things, we really need to know from the families what's going on. There are advocates for these loved ones as well.
So now that you're talking about food, my favorite.
Food.
Food.
Fun food.
Yeah, fun food. So how important is the food at the community?
That's what they live for. Food is very important, like the other day after going through the holidays, they said, all we want is a salad. Well, we have guys too, so you got to have the backup plan for the guys. Some of them will eat salads, but most of them are going to want to know, where's my meat and potatoes on the side? The ladies are like, we just want a salad. We're done. I mean, that's the same thing with us, hey, we're done, or they may say, okay, it's been pretty cold out. We want our soup, salads, chili. And then other people we find out say, oh, that might've been the majority, but where's mine? And so you got to be ready for that. So it was recently, the majority of them wanted something and we did it. But then the others were like, okay, but we still want to have our meatloaf and we still want to have our full everything. So you just got to be ready for that. And every so often there can be some hiccups there, but it really does need to be made from scratch. Our eclairs are made from scratch. Our cream puffs, our meatloaf, turkeys, they're coming in, they're turkeys. And food costs have gone up. So you really need to watch that, because you'll hear through the grapevine, oh, they just got bologna sandwiches. Okay, if they ask for bologna sandwiches, that's great, because some of them like fried bologna. But if you're hearing about that on a regular basis and you're paying pretty much the same as everybody else, no, they need to be taking care of that. If I run out of food and I had a couple cooks out, say during COVID, Country Inn, Ackett's Catering, we just pulled them in that way. You're paying for it. So we try to make sure we, keep those standards, no matter what the situation is behind the scenes. That shouldn't be an issue for you and your loved one. Yes, they do like hot dogs, once in a while. Frankly, it costs me more to go get the McDonald's because they want McDonald's, and we could probably make better burgers, but it's the fact that they said they want a McDonald's. They want a McDonald's sandwich. They want a McDonald's fries. They have McDonald's. I do that. I get in trouble once in a while as the owner, because on occasion I'll ask them if they want to get sundaes from Dairy Queen, and I get them, forgetting that dinner's in a half hour. They're not going to necessarily eat. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's fun. And awesome. Pizza, it's not typically going to be Little Caesars. I want it to be greens, So those are some of the things you want to look at. The nutrition's nutrition's key to everything they do. You got to make sure they eat their proteins. And then with their medications, especially on memory care, you got to think outside of the box. I know sometimes it sounds, ew, why'd you do that? But if you put syrup in their eggs and you put syrup in their food already, that it gets their taste buds. It's more so sometimes on memory care because the meds are on, and it helps them. Sweet and sour sauce. So you learn these different things that if you hide it in with their food, you put some sugar on it and they're not diabetic and they'll eat it that way. Who cares? It's nothing going to hurt them, and you're getting them to eat. You know, I had one guy who had nothing but oatmeal and chocolate milk. So did we put protein powder in there? He didn't want to wear dentures. He didn't care. It was his farm, and that's what he was doing. He did it. It was like 2 or 3 years like that, and he was fine.
That's gonna be
Just
me.
that's just what he wanted, and that's what he did, and that's all he was going to eat. So you give him. Another guy was a bachelor for I don't know how many years. Hot dogs. That's all he wanted. That's what he had. We get him to do different things on occasion, but you get him in his eggs, and you get protein powder in some other way, and just kind of have to really monitor it. But at some point, it has to be their decision as well, and you can't force them. So you just got to sometimes be really specific to that person. But for the most part, you got to have that great food. They live for their food, and they live for the activities
What
and
I
for
love
family.
is,
They definitely want to see their family.
yeah.
Yeah.
What I love is that you're thinking out of the box. Number one, you're giving them what they want, you know, but you're also
Yeah.
thinking out of the box in regards to increasing their overall nutrition, right?
Yeah, it takes a lot. It does, and you got to be creative. And they may drink a shake, but you better make sure it's the right color, and it better not be green, even though there might be greens in it. So
Yeah.
I call that food
Better
night
not
out.
be free. That's
Yep.
hilarious. So how important is the staff tenure when you're looking for a community to put your loved one?
I hate to say right now, there's really none of that. Back in the day, I mean, I still have some of my employees from when I used to run other communities or own other communities, and they still are with me and they still follow me. So tenure is a hard one right now. I would love to say you want to make sure my executive director has been with me from the beginning. She left for a few months and then came back again. My life enrichment director, cooks took us a while. We've had a great cook now. She's been with us. We finally have a sound nurse, but it's been a little bit more difficult to get that stability because a lot of them have taken advantage of the COVID pay, and they have children at home they have to deal with, and they couldn't take care of the children not being in school, and it didn't make sense for them to work when they had to be at home with them. So longevity is kind of out the door right now. I mean, I do have some, like I said, but you're trying to rebuild all of that right now. So the main thing is to make sure that they're stable, you're on top of them, you're spending the time training them, and taking care of that. Familiarity as much as you can and stability is key. Even with housekeeping, maintenance, everybody, you want them to be familiar with the residents because they can help you with their care and understanding your residents better too. Anybody who sees them or is around them. Maintenance is very important. Housekeeping, they're in there too. They'll sit there and talk to them. Believe it or not, your beauticians, I mean, your beauty salons, if there's an issue going on, the beauty salon, they're going to hear it. And hopefully they're going to come back to you and say, hey, I heard this is what's going on in town. This is the gossip. And then you can get on it. So hopefully it's good gossip, but sometimes it's not. And you gotta fix it. So
Right.
that's a little touchy right now and everybody in the world. So
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. All industries, I think, are dealing with this. What about
Yeah.
staff ratios? Can you talk to us about what that is and why that's important?
Staff ratios are important, but it also has to do with how willing your staff is to with burnout, and it's you just got to follow through. It's painful right now again, but we're using agency to make sure we keep those ratios in check. It's costly. They don't have the same ownership as you hope your staff would, but there's quite a few that are compassionate out there as home care agencies with their staff, and it helps you get through it. We're getting much more stable as an industry as a whole now, which is great. And we're seeing that we can get our staff ratios back up to where they should be. Typically, I think we're around 1 to 12, and we try to stay in that ratio. So we'll see sometimes we have a floater that goes back between the assisted living and memory care side, and then we have the other staff as well. So we really try to stick at least to a 1-to-12 ratio.
Does
You
your
want to do that for a
licensing,
number of
I'm sorry, does your licensing mandate a certain number?
licensing mandates that you have your enough staff to make sure your resident service plans are being covered. So if my resident service plan says I have 3 and 4 people that are 2-person transfers or slide boards or have to be toileted because of a wound every hour, whatever those service plans are, I have to have the staff accordingly. So sometimes I have some heavier duty assisted living individuals that might be 2-person transfers or might have a couple wounds or things coming into my community. On the memory care side, by the nurse's station for those reasons, so we can keep those staff ratios a little bit different. So yes, your state really does govern that. If they find out your staff ratios and they start hearing complaints, you're hoping the families tell you first, and then if we don't address them, shame on us, definitely go to another source. Because it is hard to find a place in the first place, and then to move them again, especially if they have memory care, it's hard. So, but yep, you got to keep on top of your staff ratios, and you have to do training regularly, like every single day. Let's do our rounds, let's see what's going on, and it's a lot of work.
Absolutely. Is there a certain part of your business where you will not accept someone based on their condition or behaviors? Because everybody has their own, specific.
That's a good question. We don't do Hoyer lifts right now. You got to have enough staff, and you have to have staff that's been trained very well. We do lift to stands because they're a little bit safer. So we've decided not to do Hoyers at this time. Wound care is another one. You're being short-staffed already. You want to make sure you have, like you said, I have a number of med techs that have been with me for a couple of years that can stay on top of wounds, but you really don't want to do them if they're more than a stage 2, maybe stage 3, because that means you're coming in and you're getting someone else's issues. But then they don't necessarily want them in a nursing home because they can't see them because of COVID or they're short-staffed. You'll have hospitals tell you, we had a lady who spilled coffee on her with a burn, and they said, don't send them to a nursing home, don't send them anywhere. Do you have wound care that can handle it? I'm very fortunate I do. We handled it all the way through, and she came through it perfectly fine. We were very fortunate for that. So you're getting pulled by different sources right now to take higher levels of care because, frankly, nursing homes don't necessarily have the staff or the ability to handle everybody they used to either. So our industry is just kind of all over the place right now. So as individuals, as owners, you have to make those decisions, and they're financial too. So yeah, turning away people is financially hard, but at the same token, you want to make sure your staff can handle who you have. And so if you get turned away and you're looking for a place, there's a reason for it. When you're looking for a place, make sure you know what those staff ratios are, making sure there is a nurse that is their employee. They'll say, oh yeah, we have a nurse. Make sure it's their employee, make sure it's not a contingent nurse, make sure it's a full-time nurse, make sure they're in the building that you see them floating around so you know that's actually their employee. Because care is all over the place right now. Hospice, it's a different world out there, and you have to be even more, I don't want to scare people, but you have to be a lot more cautious than you used to be, for sure.
Sure.
Fortunately, the governor did change the rules that said whether you're COVID in the building, not COVID in the building, your loved one has COVID or not has COVID, vaccinated or not vaccinated, you can make those decisions now, and you can take those risks now. And on our side, we have to watch out for everybody and make sure if you're going to do that, you're not vaccinated, your loved one is, or et cetera, that you stay in the room and you follow proper guidelines. So it's a little bit harder all over the board right now. Some people are starting to just lock down their dining rooms right now for the spread of COVID. We're fortunate most of ours are vaccinated, but the handful that aren't, we have to handle differently. So there's a lot more layers than there used to be with care.
Right. If, somebody wants to tour your community or another community, Clinton Creek, do you have certain recommendations? Is there a best time to go? Should they set appointment in advance? What's your thoughts about that?
Unfortunately, again, I don't even, hate to bring this up again, but with COVID, you really do need to make an appointment more so. But after that, and if you've done the tour, you can always just say, hey, I'm stopping in. I needed to grab another piece of paperwork or something. You shouldn't be smelling incontinence. I mean, every so often someone might have had too much sauerkraut for a few days or certain things, but you want to make sure the community's clean. You want to make sure the residents are healthy. I'm very fortunate and blessed. My residents are kind of annoying. As soon as they see someone new coming through the door, hi, 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 I'm the greeters, which is great for me. But you want to see that. You want to see life in the community. No one should be blaming it on COVID anymore. They shouldn't. I mean, if they have to hire agency, hire agency. If you have to cater food, cater food. If you have to do this, you just got to do it. But if the residents aren't happy and the staff's not happy, run. That really, you don't want to hear that they're using grocery store bags for trash bags. You can get trash bags. You don't want to hear that they had X, Y, and Z to eat when they should be having this to eat. So you really want to pay attention and listen to the residents. Yeah. If it's something your normal, like a neighborhood complaint group, so Susie needs to go to the memory care side, you pay attention to it. But most of the time you should be seeing those residents should be happy. They should be excited to be where they're at. And they should be greeting you as well. So if you don't see that, and you'll know. I mean, if it's depressing to be around and you're walking in the door and your residents aren't out and about, it's probably not the place. One of my pet peeves is, oh, well, they fell asleep at the front door and I have a tour coming, so we need to move them. No, this is their home. Yes, their teeth fell out. They're sleeping at the front door. I get it. I don't care. This is their home. I'm not telling them, oh, you have to get up. If you don't see the residents hanging around the front door, if you don't see the residents putting their feet on the furniture, I mean, most of the time they don't, but behind the scenes, a lot of that can go on, and you don't want that. You want it to be natural. So yeah, should you walk in to do a tour now that things are open more? Definitely. You don't have to worry about it as much. If someone walked in the door right now, could I do a tour for them? Sure. But you don't want to have that, oh, these people aren't in the front. This isn't being used. That's not being used. Unless there's an activity going around. You want to see life in the community.
Absolutely. And
you want to see caregivers running around in the community. You want to see, or you want to know why. Everybody's doing showers right now, or we just had this activity, or we just had communion. So there's an explanation for it, but if not, you really need to see caregivers running around, walking through those halls.
so like from a broad standpoint, kind of stepping back and, what I hear you saying is observing, just taking it all in, what's happening.
Yeah.
What do the residents look like? Are they clean? Are they happy? Are they active? Are the staff active? Are everybody kind of engaged in what's happening at the community? Does that make sense?
Exactly, engaged. You want to see that, okay, there's a housekeeping card out there, so someone's doing housekeeping. Yeah, everybody's a little short-staffed right now and a little stressed right now, but at the same time, you want to know that there's people in the community. Another thing is to look at is cars in the parking lot. I've driven by some large communities and there's only 2 and 3 cars in the parking lot after say 5 o'clock. I'm like, oh, either they have a bunch of vacancies or they're short staffed, or sometimes they use mass transit. I get that too, but you kind of want to see what's going on. If you're a family member, you don't feel comfortable visiting after hours and things, then there's a problem. But you also, if that's the case, need to tell someone in the management so we can say, oh, this is what's going on after hours. And in my case or anybody's case, you start hiring more people and hopefully fix the situation. So
right.
A lot to look at, a lot to think of.
Yeah, Krista, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions.
I have just one more real quick is pricing. Just so you know, it's not as easy as it used to be, as if you've just been touring and looking for places. This has A, B, and C program, but then it has this add-on, that add-on, and 10 other different add-ons. You try to get that hammered down. I feel bad for families because right now there's no easy way to compare apples to apples. The best thing is to do is to tour, find the communities you like the best, sit down with a list of all the services that are in there and really get them to say, okay, they're not feeling well, we're going to charge them $5 for every meal we bring to their room. No, I don't do that. Okay, they did this and that, so this is going to increase. They're having the flu for the week. No, you wait 2-3 weeks, talk to the family, change the service plan, then charge them. They might have had a bad month. It might have been when their husband passed away, or it might have been some other reason. It's very hard right now. There's been a number of memory care in other communities that have really increased their rates. I'm not the cheapest, I'm not the most expensive, but at the same time, I include a lot. Toilet paper, paper towel, Kleenex, sheets, towels, linens, all that stuff adds up, phone, cable, internet. So you just want to kind of see what the bigger picture is, because a lot of times you get in there and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're brand new, they give you a deal, and the next month, next 6 months, 9 months, whatever, your rate goes up $1,000 and you're like, I can't do this. Mom's got to move. Why'd they do this? And then you're mad and angry, and the whole situation falls apart. And it's not an easy one to make in the first place.
Right, absolutely. Thank you for that information as well. And if you are interested in reaching out to Dawn and her community, I have put up on the screen how you get in touch with them and where they are located.
Appreciate that, Krista and Misty. Thank you. And there's a lot of great communities out there. Just take your time. And I wish there was a magic one that we could say, okay, if you're looking for these big communities with all this stuff, that's great. Is Mom going to be able to walk around and get to them? That's another story. So I just chose to make sure mine was smaller so they can get to everything and not feel overwhelmed. And other people like the larger. So there's options. It's just a lot to go through. And Misty's a great way to help you navigate through some of that as well. And Krista.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you are unsure, and, a lot of times we're dealing with family members who they think something wrong in the home, but maybe everybody in the family's not on that same page, and they need an outside person to come in and evaluate and give recommendations. And it typically solves the issue, with what's happening in the home and then what's recommended for the next steps. So definitely, this is why families hire us, to look at communities like Dawn's. And I do want to say one thing. Dawn's community is very unique. So if you haven't toured it, you should tour it, in that it's a smaller community. It has assisted living, it has memory care. What I like about it is it has locked down assisted living, which is a good thing, for some folks that, aren't ready to transition over to memory care unit yet. And also you've got an owner who's involved every day in the community. I can't tell you how many communities I've been in, and there's some great communities out there, but when you have an owner that pays their salary based off of what's happening at that community, and their heart is in it, which I know Dawn yours is, then it really makes a great amount of difference. So you look at this community and you say, she has two full-time activity people, and I can't tell you, we don't typically see that. You'll have one most recent community that I went to had one activity person for independent, assisted, and memory care. Not that that's good or bad. I'm just saying the amount of time and effort that one person can do versus one person for assisted and one first person for memory just looks significantly different, if that's important to you and your family in regards to where they go. Some people, activity isn't a big deal, food is a big deal, or something else, which is great, fine too. But I do want to point that out, that is different about your community. It's centrally located in Macomb County, right on Garfield, near 18 Mile Road, easy to get to. And so thanks, Dawn, for coming. We appreciate you being here. And then Krista, do you want to go over what we have coming up?
Yeah, our next community education series is on January 20th at noon, and we're going to be talking about understanding memory care. I know that's a big thing right now, and people have a lot of questions in regards to that. So please join us on Facebook Live for that on that day. And then in February on the 3rd at noon again, we're going to be talking about medication machines and how they can increase compliancy for people who are taking medications, especially as they get older and have memory loss. So those are some pretty important things that we will be talking about.
So thank you, everybody.
Sounds great.
Thanks for joining us. And
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you next week.
Sounds great. See you guys. Great
Bye.
job.
Bye, Dawn. Thank you.
Bye.